Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank members of this House for the views shared during the budget debate. Over the last 2 weeks, I've also noted thoughtful views from fellow Singaporeans, academics, journalists, and business owners. I'm grateful for this feedback. Some challenge our current thinking, while others help us define our policies over time. We all have the same objective. It is to help Singaporeans thrive and build a strong, united Singapore. As we celebrate the bicentennial, let us take a step back to reflect on how we got here today and how we would like to move forward. Some MPs have provided good and useful overviews of the budget and how they benefit various parties, such as Mr. Liang Eng Hua. Some have delivered vivid speeches during the budget debates, such as the one about Akong and Asing. And my speech will not be as poetic as SPS Biam King's. Now, listening to over 12 hours of your speeches in the last 2 days and this morning, I realized that it is not possible for me to address each of the points you raised. My colleagues will engage you in the specifics of policies within their ministry's purview. And as you can see, I too have 2 files on budget day. So this will be a long speech. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, with your permission, may I use some slides so that I can guide, so that it's easier for the chamber to follow my speech?
Yes, please.
So, in rounding up the debate today, I can value add by picking up some of the common threads in your speeches and to reinforce some of the key principles for this budget and those before, which make up the Singapore way. So, what is the Singapore way? First, we put people at the center of our plans, strategies, and programs. Second, we plan long-term while taking an adaptive approach to respond to changing circumstances and needs. Third, we do all of this together, working in partnership. These principles reinforce each other and have allowed us to do more with less. For instance, in the area of education, I showed this slide at last year's debate, and this is education. We didn't spend the most, but you look at the outcome that our students achieved in this PISA score. Healthcare, again, we didn't spend the most, but we have the second highest life expectancy next to Japan. And you look at how many of the OECD countries, the OECD average, are all on the right-hand side. And policing. Good outcomes in policing, where again, with the spending that we have of just slightly above 0.6% of GDP, we are ranked one of the safest in the world. So these are all very credible outcomes despite spending less than what other countries do. Now, I will now elaborate on each of these principles. The first principle of the Singapore way is putting Singaporeans at the center of what we do. We empower people through education, create a good environment for families, help Singaporeans to earn and save more for retirement, and support aging with assurance. As engineer Dr. Lee Bee Hua put it so eloquently, all of us, 隆重是为了你, 完全是为了你, it's all for you. Many MPs, including Mr. Louis Ng, Ms. Jessica Tan, and Mr. Gan Thiam Poh, have given suggestions on addressing class divisions, inequality, and helping all Singaporeans do well, including the less privileged. The question is, how best to do so? As Mr. Saktiandi Supaat put it, it cannot be just through a Robin Hood style of social transfers. We believe that the best way to take care of our people is to build capacity, That is, for our young, we give them a strong foundation in terms of a good education and exposure so that they have the knowledge, skills, and values necessary to chase their dreams. For our workers, we invest in increasing their capacity through upgrading and reskilling. Crucially, We also build an economy that provides them with opportunities. For those who have fallen behind, we provide stronger support systems. And this is for those who have fallen behind and who need help to access opportunities, we provide stronger support systems. And this is with the ultimate objective to give them the confidence and dignity to succeed for themselves as far as possible. And for our seniors, we support them in their desire to age successfully. We have been providing significant support and will continue to do so. Let me illustrate. Our young get a high-quality education which provides a solid grounding to chase their dreams. We make sure this is available to all our people, regardless of background. We keep education affordable. Parents paid $13 each month per child for primary school fees. This is possible due to the significant subsidies provided to every child. On average, every child entering primary 1 in 2018 would have received over $130,000 in education subsidies by the time he or she completes secondary school. Those who go on to post-secondary education receive another $10,000 to $22,000, $15,000 to $22,000 for every year they remain in school. And beyond just making sure that everyone can afford education, we make sure there is good quality for everyone, not just the top achievers or better off. In 2018, we provided at least 60% more resourcing for primary school students with a weaker foundation in literacy and numeracy through learning support programs in schools. Our commitment to maximizing pathways to success is clear. We have specialized schools catering to the needs of normal technical students, those with interest in science and technology, or the arts or sports. Most visitors to our country are very impressed with what we have done for our ITEs, sometimes better designed and resourced than their universities. I think several members in this House and myself have been bringing visitors to ITE, and they've been surprised to see what we have in the ITE. Now, MOE will elaborate more on our plans to uplift our students at the Committee of Supply. What we do is not necessarily the case worldwide. In the US, public funding per student varies widely across states and within states. For example, within the state of New York, one school district can get 3 times that of another school district based on how well off each school district is. I agree with Professor Lim San San, who said that we need to help our students develop cross-cultural, digital, and ethical, or CDE competencies. And this on top of the ABCs and 1, 2, 3 we teach them. Professor Fatima Latif also called on Singaporeans to develop strong networks to thrive in an age of change and disruption. Our schools provide this holistic education by making available core curricular activities, applied learning programs, and learning for life programs, all of which are heavily funded by MOE. When I was Education Minister, I visited many school systems around the world. And what struck me in many of the school systems was that when I asked, if your child or if your student wants to learn arts, music, dance, sports, what do they do? And in many of the school systems, the answer is, well, they have to join outside clubs. And I say, how do you pay for it? Well, we as parents pay for it. Whereas in our school system, co-curricular activities to develop our students' interests and to develop them in diverse ways are part of the school system and funded by the government. And the EduSafe Awards for Achievement, Good Leadership and Service, or EAGLES, and the EduSafe Skills Awards are just some of the ways we recognize students who demonstrate excellence for achievements beyond academic. And you never know where the path will lead you. Take, for example, Mr. Wong Kar-chun, whom PM spoke about at the National Day rally last year. He grew up in a Chinese-speaking family, but through his school band, discovered a love for Western classical music, and is now the first Singaporean to conduct a New York Philharmonic Orchestra. We also support our young people to build their cross-cultural competencies. In this and the last two budgets, I set out plans that have helped our tertiary students, young workers, and aspiring leaders to build friendships with people and understand our region better. These include the Global Innovation Alliance, the Leadership Development Initiative, and the Global Ready Talents Program. I was at a groundbreaking ceremony of Razor last week. I was excited that with Razor's expansion, we'll be able to have many more opportunities for young Singaporeans, both here and overseas. We will continue to do more for our young. We've been investing more in preschool to make preschool education better, more accessible, and affordable, especially for the lower income. And this will help our students build a solid foundation from an even younger age. Let me move on to how we build capacity in our workers to help them pursue their career goals. I agree with NTUC Secretary General Ng Chee Meng and Mr. Seah Kian Peng that for the fourth industrial revolution, or Industry 4.0, to work for us, we need Worker 4.0 as well. Meaning we need our workers to transform and build capacity in tandem. As Mr. Desmond Chew mentioned, learning and building capacity does not stop after formal education. Learning takes place anywhere, anytime, from anyone. The workplace is a good place for our workers to learn. As Mr. Patrick Tay has mentioned, we provide support for our workers to reskill and upskill, to seize opportunities and do well for themselves. The Skills Future movement provides support for our workers to develop skills and pursue lifelong learning. For those who are displaced, we help them find a new job and reskill where necessary through programs such as Adapt and Grow. The labour movement plays a key role in this. I would like to thank the Labour MPs for all speaking on a common theme of every worker matters and sharing their thoughtful views on what we should do to better support our workers. SMS Heng Chi Hao spoke on how putting workers at the heart of all we do. And I'm glad they recognize in Mr. Zainal Sapari and Mr. Ang Hin Keat's words that this year's budget is pro-worker. The Labour MPs and Ms. Sylvia Lim have spoken about various segments of our workforce: young workers, older workers, mid-career professionals, low-income workers, self-employed workers, and those with caregiving responsibilities. MOM and MOE will address some of their suggestions in greater detail during the Committee of Supply. A common thread in the comments, as Mr. Arasu Doraisamy has noted, was how employers have a key role to play in helping their workers upgrade. Mr. Melvin Yong commented that workers who go for training need to pull double shifts, training in the day, working at night. This is not easy to do. As workers put in the effort to train, I urge all employers to give them full support. I would also like to explain how we support our low-wage workers, in line with concerns raised by Dr. Intan Mokhtar and others. Where possible, we want them to build capacity through upskilling so that they can move up the wage ladder. This is why we give workfare, not welfare. We have the workfare training support scheme to encourage skills upgrading and a workfare income supplement, which I announced enhancements to this year. Through workfare and a progressive wage model, we help lower income workers upskill and reskill, earn more and save more. I'm heartened to hear that Singaporeans, both within and outside the House, are concerned about whether families of lower wage workers can make ends meet. Some, like Mr. Muhammad Ishad, have suggested that the way to address this is to allow younger Singaporeans to be given a workfare income supplement. At this point, I would like to explain the design of workfare and why we provide more support to older income workers. Much as we wish to help those who earn less, how we do it is important. Permanently increasing their capacity to earn more, is a more sustainable way to improving their lot in life and helping them support their family members. This is best done by upgrading their skills and improving their chances of getting better paying jobs. What they learn today will be useful for many years down the road and build a foundation for further learning. In the meantime, we help them take care of their family's needs, such as bursaries for their children or Medifund for their parents' hospitalization bills. And where there are challenges with accessing skills training, I'm confident that NTUC and our unions can come in to support. Education and employment support are part of the comprehensive system of social support which benefit our less well-off. On the whole, our broad-based schemes are designed to provide them with more support. We help our workers save for retirement through the CPF, which provides a risk-free return with extra 1% interest on the first $60,000 of CPF balances. Those who are aged 55 and above receive an additional 1% for the first $30,000 of balances. This structure tilts the benefits in support of members with lower balances. It is in the spirit of what Mr. Saktiandi Supat mentioned, of helping small savers grow their income. We also help Singaporeans own their homes with more housing subsidies for the lower income. There are few countries where young couples buy a home before they get married. In fact, in many cities, there's a huge gulf between those who can own properties and those who do not. We continually rejuvenate our estates and upgrade our flats so that they remain vibrant and livable homes for our people. These flats could also provide an additional source of income in retirement. At the same time, we provide targeted support for those from less advantaged backgrounds in different forms. Ms. Shara Chan spoke about the need to uplift these groups. We have put in place schemes such as Keat Start and the Fresh Start Housing Scheme, which help the lower income get back on their feet. For those in their old age, Silver Support provides a supplement for those who had low incomes through life and little family support. ComCare is available to those with greater needs. And there's always room to do even better, as many MPs have mentioned. But overall, it is a good system which gives Singaporeans a good foundation in life. That we still find occasional cases which fall through the cracks does not behove us to knock down the system. It gives us, policy makers, public officers, social workers, community volunteers, the motivation to do better through action. Let me now turn to our seniors. Singapore is aging quicker than many other developed countries. We made the transition from an aging to an aged society in an exceptionally short span of 19 years. In comparison, Japan, the world's most aged country, took 26 years. Other countries like France took more than a century, 115 years, and Sweden took 85. Furthermore, by 2025, Singaporeans will become a super-aged country, with 21% of our citizen population aged 65 years and older. But this should not be viewed in a negative light. Singaporeans can redefine aging, and we're already doing so. Our 3 billion action plan for successful aging was launched in 2016, taking in feedback from thousands of Singaporeans, both young and old, on what they saw successful aging to be. Compare the title of this latest action plan with the title of the first committee on aging we set up in 1982, the Committee on the Problems of the Aged. Things have changed. And learning from the many seniors I've met who inspire me, let me share how they are redefining aging by staying active, staying healthy, and staying connected. If we help all our seniors to make this transition, it will benefit them. It will also inspire all our younger generations. Our seniors want to stay active, be it through work, volunteering, learning something new, or keeping up with their grandchildren. And we want to support them in doing so. Opportunities to learn, grow, and achieve do not stop at the retirement age. In fact, the National Silver Academy, which was part of the Action Plan for Successful Aging, came about because our seniors told us that they wanted to keep learning and contributing to society. The Academy now provides a range of courses for senior learners and supports intergenerational learning programs. I'm glad that we have support for this on both sides of the House. Associate Professor Daniel Goh and Mr. Faisal Manap have also made a strong pitch for our seniors to be active and continue to be the best they can be. Our seniors also want to stay healthy. Having the second highest life expectancy in the world, we're in a good place. I recently met Ms. Peng Lia, one of our Merdeka generation or MG, at a TV forum. And she told me she appreciated the Merdeka generation package or the MGP benefits as they provided assurance that her healthcare expenses would be there, will be taken care of. And even better, the benefits would be there, but not used, or what she called 备而不用, 备而不用, meaning that it was best if she could stay healthy and do not have to seek treatments in the first instance. I agree very much with her. The intention is for our seniors to focus on staying well. The MGP is there as an added assurance. So I'm glad to hear Ms. Joan Pereira and Ms. Irene Gui expressing support for this. I'm always very happy to see groups of seniors coming together regularly in parks or other public spaces to exercise, doing line dancing or Zumba Go together. In fact, I understand that many of our seniors are exercising regularly in over 400 locations across the island. This is a good sign, and I hope that there will be even more of such groups in the years to come. And last but not least, our seniors want to stay connected with one another and with those around them. I'm encouraged by the progress made through the Community Networks for Seniors, which brings together government agencies and community partners to help us have the ABCs, where seniors stay active and befriend and care for one another. Some 1,500 seniors have come forward as volunteers to befriend and help other seniors. Take the example of Mr. Bernard Lai, who was a member of our Merdeka generation. And besides juggling his work commitments, he's an active grassroots leader, a member of various sports clubs, and a Silver Generation ambassador. At the MG Tribute event hosted by PM early this month, Dick Lee, Jacinta Abisheganaden, Mel Fernandez, and Rahima Rahim, all MGs, gave a spirited rendition of Merdeka Sayang. I quote, "With our silver hair, we still contribute," unquote. And another quote, "We work hard, but still young at heart." Indeed, these lyrics reflect the spirit with which we approach aging. So fried rice paradise just got better with age. Our pioneers were the first generation of Singaporeans who were living and working in Singapore after we became independent. Our Merdeka generation is the next younger generation, better educated and healthier. So we look to you to redefine aging and forge a new path on what it means to be the independent generation. Now, I've spoken about how we take care of our people. In essence, it is through building capacity in everyone, our young, working adults, seniors, to be the best that they can be, while giving those who need help even more support and help in a targeted way. Now, MPs have also brought up other important issues. Ms. Joan Pereira and Ms. Antia Ong spoke of the importance of support for those with mental health and this will be taken up at the MOH COS. Ms. Joan Pereira, Associate Professor Daniel Goh, and Ms. Rahayu Mazam have also spoken on how to better support women, especially those who are caregivers. As Minister Josephine Teo shared, many of our existing schemes do benefit women more. In particular, the CPF top-up in this year's bicentennial bonus will support women who did not work and therefore had low CPF savings for retirement. It is a fitting recognition of their contribution. We build capacity and adopt a long-term orientation in our planning, and this is a second principle of the Singapore way. We plan for the long term because we plan for Singapore to be here in the long term. We look ahead, often tapping on knowledge of experts here and overseas so that we can prepare for the future. Aging, climate change, and changing economic trends are just some of the issues that we have been preparing for. As I mentioned earlier, the first Committee on Aging was set up in 1982, when the proportion of Singaporeans aged 65 and above was only 5%. We are looking at various infrastructural plans to protect us from rising sea levels due to climate change, the effects of which are projected to hit us sometime between 2050 and 2100. Given a long-term horizon, it is difficult to project these spending needs now. Nonetheless, we are planning early, seeing what we can do, and we'll work out the resourcing accordingly. Our plan spanned many years, putting in place the right infrastructure, charting the course of our economy, and steadily building up our capabilities. Given the long gestation of these projects, such as the airport and port projects, it is inevitable that they are subject to risks and uncertainties in the operating environment. So I share Mr. Dennis Tan's concerns on this issue. However, this uncertainty should not prevent us from making exciting investments. Rather, they are impetus for bold but deliberate planning. Operating in challenging environments has always been our lot in life, which has taught us to plan carefully. Back in the 1980s, when we were building Changi Terminal 2, we also faced regional and economic uncertainties. But we persevered and overcame these challenges. We do not shy away from making difficult decisions if they are necessary for the long run. That is why we've been pushing hard on economic restructuring and have taken further steps this year to drive deeper restructuring. As Dara David and Ms. Jessica Tan pointed out, there are significant shifts in the global economy, which means that we will be stuck if we stick to business as usual. We are fortunate to be in Asia, where the growth is. However, the rapid growth of Asian economies will result in shifting comparative and competitive advantages in the region, which we will need to adapt in order to benefit from this growth. Supply chains are shifting. This is driven by new technologies, the shift of global demand to emerging markets, and the consolidation of supply chains within manufacturing powerhouses in the region. At the same time, global value chains are becoming more knowledge-intensive, with research and development, software, design, and other intangibles forming a greater share of value created. Now, we are well placed to ride on these changes. As a regional hub in many areas, such as finance, professional services, and logistics, we are well positioned as a base for businesses to capture the growing regional demand for such services. We also continue to have a strong manufacturing base, despite increasing competition from other economies. We must push ahead to strengthen Singapore's position as a global Asian node of technology, innovation, and enterprise. We will continue investing in research, innovation, and enterprise development and support our entrepreneurs and businesses to boldly venture into new markets. And this will bring new opportunities to our people and firms. However, the window to achieve deeper economic restructuring to help more of our firms capitalize on this opportunity is narrow. We have achieved strong macroeconomic fundamentals through policies introduced over the years. What we need now is to double down on improving productivity and innovation at the industry and firm level, in particular through a targeted, tailored approach to get firms of different types to adapt and transform. We have made the difficult but necessary move of cutting the DRC levels for the services sector. Several MPs, including Mr. Chong Ki-hyong, gave feedback that some firms from the services sector find it difficult to automate their processes. But the reality, as Senior Minister of State Heng pointed out, is that our resident labour force will continue to slow. If we do not move decisively on improving productivity and building up a skilled Singaporean core in industries which are currently lagging, firms will find it harder to adjust in the future. As Senior Minister of State Chee Hong Tat described it, the DRC cuts are like 苦口良药, bitter medicine that makes us better off in the long run. Even as we cut DRC levels, we'll help our firms in transition, as Senior Minister of State Zaqy Mohamad has outlined. As we take a long-term view in our planning, we must also consistently review our policies to take into account new trends, new feedback, and new evidence. As Mr. Christopher D'Souza just mentioned, because of the rapidly changing world and our unique challenges, it is critical that we be able to draw from a broad slate of policies and avoid strict adherence to theories. We must be prepared to experiment and take calculated risks. If we do not succeed at first, we learn from our experience and try again. This is how we become better as a people and as a country. I encourage all ministries to adopt this entrepreneurial mindset and to continue to keep trying out different solutions for the issues that we face. We must be focused on exploring what works, discard what does not, and execute effectively so as to achieve better outcomes for Singapore and Singaporeans. Hence, we adjust and calibrate our approach as we go along to take in feedback and learn from outcomes to make our schemes more useful and effective for firms and workers. For example, a common feedback from SME was that it was difficult to navigate government schemes and get support for business transformation. To help firms identify the support available to them, we launched one-stop portals like the Business Grants Portal and Startup SG. To reduce the number of schemes for firms to navigate, we rationalized grants that serve similar objectives under the Productivity Solutions Grant, Enterprise Development Grants, and PACT program. And this year, we'll streamline 8 financing schemes into a single enterprise financing scheme. Our policies have been gradually adapted to help Singaporeans better prepare for retirement as we live longer. CPF Life, Silver Support, and the lease buyback schemes were introduced to boost the retirement savings of our seniors. MediShield Life, which started as MediShield, and CareShield Life, which will replace ElderShield for younger cohorts, will provide universal and lifetime coverage for healthcare needs. Later this year, we will expand CHARS subsidies to provide universal coverage for chronic illnesses. And this last move, as Ms. Rahayu Mazam noted, shows the willingness of the government to make changes where necessary. In fact, as Dr. Lim Wee Keat said, we do have a universal healthcare system. As a pre-funding scheme, MediSave too has to evolve as medical technology advances, as more options become available, and as the population ages. We'll remain flexible and adaptive to deliver the best outcomes for our people. There have been questions in and outside of this House on whether we will or should have packages like the Pioneer Generation Package or Merdeka Generation Package for future generations. Some have even suggested names. And some ask in anticipation, others ask because they are worried about Who pays? Now, policy making in real life does not assume that we start with perfection. My earlier examples show that we do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We do what is good, learn by doing, and adapt and improve continually. During Singapore's journey from third world to first, our Merdeka generation and our pioneers especially did not benefit from the social safety nets we have today and the investments we can now make. They have fewer or no educational opportunities. They earned less. The CPF contribution rates started out very much lower. So a cohort-based approach to support them in the silver years is appropriate. You can say that we custom-made the packages to better meet their needs and to honor them for what they have done for Singapore. And for the younger cohorts, they too will have needs, but they are not of the same nature as the pioneers or MGs. Today, more than 9 in 10 Singaporean youths can expect to go on to a post-secondary education. 9 in 10. This is compared to less than 2 in 10 among our youngest MGs and about 1 in 10 for our pioneers when they were at the same age. The schemes we have put in place over the years, MediSave, MediShield Life, CareShield Life, enjoyed over their full working lives, will make sure that by the time they reach retirement, they'll be in a much better position than the pioneers or MGs to look after their own healthcare needs. Of course, some among us will still need more help. The government will look at the needs of each group and tailor our policies and programs in the future. Senior Minister of State Chee Hong Tat has summarized this well. The Merdeka Generation Package is not linked to the election cycle, nor is it linked to the unexpected surpluses this term. It is a plan that has been carefully studied over a significant period of time. Not many countries in the world has gone through a similarly compressed period of accelerated growth, leading to relatively wide divergences between the older and younger generations. Building on our substantial base of permanent healthcare schemes, a calibrated cohort-based approach is fair to different generations. If we continue to take a responsible and long-term approach to planning, younger Singaporeans need not fear that they will end up with a disproportionate share of the cost. But if we lose this discipline and make rash promises, like universal healthcare benefits regardless of circumstances, I would worry for our future generations. I've outlined 2 aspects of the Singapore way, putting people at the center of what we do and planning long-term. The third principle of the Singapore way that I would like to highlight is partnership. We have consistently been advocating this partnership for years. As Mr. Murali-Pillay pointed out, this is not just this budget, but also past budgets, which had partnership as a key element. In Budget 2016, our theme was Partnering for the Future. In 2017, it was Moving Forward Together. And in 2018, it was Together, a Better Future. Previous finance ministers have had different ways of titling their budget speeches, but partnerships, working together, has always been key to our policies. As Professor Fatima Latif put it, partnerships to prosper involves partnerships at all levels, globally, regionally, and in Singapore, in our businesses and in the community. Partnerships are also important for the arts community, as Mr. Terence Ho shared. We seek to be friends to all and build strong international partnerships for mutually beneficial outcomes. and we've been steadily strengthening our partnerships. Free trade agreements allow our businessmen access to other markets, and this is particularly important in this period where there's significant trade tensions. Defense agreements allow ministries to build mutual understanding. Collaborations between officials and businesses build goodwills and better people-to-people connections. Examples are Suzhou Kendor, the Chongqing Connectivity Initiative, Iskandar Malaysia, and the new state capital of Andhra Pradesh. But of all partnerships that we build, the most foundational ones are the partnerships within Singapore. A strong and united Singapore enables us, both governments and our people, to build strong partnerships elsewhere. A strong and united Singapore assures our partners around the world that we can be taken at our word and will not cycle back on our commitments due to domestic divisions. A strong and united Singapore also sends a clear signal of our will and resolve to defend our sovereignty and safeguard our vital interests. One key partnership within Singapore is our tripartite arrangement, which is unique strength for Singapore. We must build on this and strengthen partnerships between the government, firms, and unions. Firms must build deeper capabilities together with their workers. The workers benefit from better jobs and better pay. A skilled, committed workforce gives firms a competitive edge. And this is a smart thing to do. We'll continue to provide support to firms which more directly link their company's growth and transformation with capability building for their workers, such as in the changes we made to the Enterprise Development Grant and the Productivity Solutions Grant. I'm glad to hear about SNEF's efforts to help employers implement responsible employment practices as a means to enhance competitiveness and sustain business growth. I'm pleased to hear NTUC Secretary General Mr. Ng Chee Meng and Senior Minister of State Koh Poh Koon talk about NTUC's plans, such as setting up of training committees and partner companies to build worker capabilities. Our unions are not just into advocacy. Our unions take concrete and meaningful action, which makes a difference to our firms and workers. And we'll continue to support our union in this effort. Now, one example of how tripartite partnerships can lead to positive outcomes is PSA. When I visited PSA earlier this month on the first day of Chinese New Year, together with Senior Minister of State Koh Poh Koon, I was glad to see them adopting new technologies such as the automated crane system. PSA has reskilled and upskilled over 1,300 workers who transitioned from city terminus to use the new technology at the Pasir Panjang terminus over the past few years. PSA has worked closely with the Singapore Port Workers Union and Port Officers Union in engaging and facilitating the change for the large pool of staff involved in this transition. Some of the crane operators I met had worked with PSA for over 20 years and commented that the changes led to better working conditions as they could work from remote air-conditioned office rather than in the crane cabin high on top of the crane, as you can see from this visual. Another example is ST Engineering's aerospace sector, which I visited earlier this week. To ride on the wave of Industry 4.0, ST Engineering has been investing in smart maintenance, repair and operations initiatives at its hangars to adopt data analytics, additive manufacturing, and automation. I was encouraged to hear that its Union Management Training Council worked closely with NTUC Learning Hub to customize the SkillsFuture digital workplace course for her workers, to familiarize her workers with digital technologies, new work processes, and automation. Over 200 staff attended the course in 2018, with another 600 staff expected to attend the course in 2019. So I'm glad to see ST Engineering building enterprise capabilities and deepening worker skill sets in tandem. Now, this is a type of positive outcomes for workers, businesses, and the government, which we all strive to achieve. Our trade associations and chambers, as representatives of firms, have an important role to play in this effort. So I'm glad to see more stepping up over the past few years. For example, through its networks with the global water community, the Singapore Water Association introduced Imagine H2O, a leading water innovation accelerator in San Francisco, to local industry players. And this led to exchanges of ideas on commercializing innovative water technologies between our firms and Imagine H2O's startups. This association is also working with ESG to immerse Imagine H2Os into the local water ecosystem. As an outcome from this exchange, Imagine H2O has assessed Singapore to be a strategic location to set up its presence for the Asian market, and is in the midst of establishing presence here. I was glad to hear Mr. Douglas Fu's affirmation that the trade associations and chambers remain committed to enhancing the business community's capabilities and collaborating with member firms, the government, and the labour movement. And I support his call, I quote, TACs to further break down individual walls and work with one another to accelerate our common national interest, unquote. The enhancements to LEAD, which I announced this budget, will further strengthen the role that TACs play. We invest in building an environment to help firms with capabilities thrive through steady investments in R&D and strengthening economic linkages to the region. This builds on our comparative advantages to help us as an economy to excel. To do so in a way which works for each sector, we bring relevant stakeholders together to drive transformation through ITMs and ITM cluster strategies. We also take an enterprise-centric approach, which focuses on issues faced by firms at each stage of growth. This tailored and targeted approach allows our economic schemes to yield better results. For firms which are ready to scale up and compete on a global scale, we provide more customized support. This is to help them identify and overcome the unique challenges they face and scale their businesses quickly. I announced the Scale Up SG program and the Pilot's Innovation Agents program this budget, which will help in this area. Mr. Liang Yinghua asked if the customized approach of the Scale Up SG program meant that the government is picking winners. This is not the case. The customized support that we provide is available to companies that show ambition and are willing to take the effort to transform themselves to scale up quickly. This support comes on top of many schemes which are accessible to firms, small and micro. For example, schemes which help firms adopt digital technology solutions, such as Start Digital Pack under SMEs Go Digital, and where there are market gaps, we provide support, such as through the Enterprise Financing Scheme, to provide financing for younger and smaller firms. These schemes, together with a wide range of schemes under the Startup SG branding, provide a strong base of support for startups, which Mr. Nispoa asked about. Now, as pointed out by Ms. Rahayu Mazam, many Singaporeans and businesses have demonstrated their care and concern for fellow Singaporeans through their good work over the years. TSMP Law Corporation is one such example. In addition to providing pro bono legal services for the disadvantaged, the firm also regularly partners VWOs to contribute time and dollar to a broad range of causes and activities. VWOs like Ang Mo Kio FSC, SPD, and Empower Aging have also done an excellent job in serving a broad range of needs in the community. And as Mr. Nispoa said, their reach extends beyond what the government can do. So I thank them for their efforts, their hard work, and more importantly, hard work in reaching out. To help them to continue deepening their capability and increase the impact of the good work they do, for instance, we started the VWO Charities Capability Development Fund in 2002 to help VWOs train their staff, expand their reach, and serve people better. In 2017, we set aside $100 million for the fourth tranche of the VWO Charities Capability Fund, or VCF. The 250% tax deduction that we offer today on qualifying donations is also one of the most generous tax deduction schemes worldwide. Jurisdictions like Hong Kong, the US, and Australia provide only 100% tax deductions for corporate and individual donations. Matching grant schemes like the new Bicentennial Community Fund, which I announced, will also catalyze more funding to our IPCs. Together with a 250% tax deduction, every dollar raised will draw a government contribution of up to $3.50. The Minister for Culture, Community and Youth will elaborate on our efforts to support philanthropy and volunteerism at the COS. We'll keep Singapore safe and secure together. That's another important part of our partnership. So I'm heartened that MPs like Mr. Henry Kwek, Mr. Darrell David, Mr. Dennis Tan, Mr. Muhammad Ishad, and Mr. Vikram Nair appreciate the geopolitical situation that Singapore is in and support our commitment to make sustained investments in our security and defense capabilities. We have good men and women in our security forces and diplomatic corps, but they cannot be everywhere or protect every flank. Every Singaporean has a part to play through national movements like SG Secure. We must stay alert, stay united, and stay strong against threats, be it terrorism or cyber warfare. Everyone must play a part in total defense. And we'll find the best way forward together. But no one, not you, not me, not the government, has all the answers. Today, we consult, engage, and partner relevant stakeholders when formulating policy. So I'm glad Associate Professor Walter Teixeira and Mr. Ang Wei Neng have spoken about the importance of feedback for more inclusive policy making for the better of our society. There's always room for improvement, and Mr. Ang has given robust feedback which our agencies will take seriously. But we must not stop at just making criticism, but reach out to one another. Recognize that we may have different views, but we can work together and find the middle ground and find the right way. We will tackle our challenges and construct better solutions together. And as Mr. Chris D'Souza has just reminded us, our political dialogues must not degenerate into political brinksmanship, as we are seeing in many developed countries. I've spoken about the Singapore way, our way, with people at the heart of our policies, planning for the long term while adapting to near-term circumstances and doing it together, working in partnership. Our budget reflects these principles, not just in the way we spend, as I had explained, but also in the way we fund our spending. Many MPs in this House has called for more M&Ms, not the sweet chocolate candy, but more and more. I too like M&M, but our resources are finite, but our needs are growing and diverse. To square the circle, we need to use the right tools for the right needs with these principles in mind. And we need all of these tools to balance our budgets in the medium term. So let me talk about each of them in turn. First, taxes. As individuals, we can all accept that we should pay for what we use. Similarly, each generation should pay for their own needs. We debated this at last year's budget, and I'm glad that many of you agreed with this. Nevertheless, there have been some reservations raised over the approach and timing of our plans to raise taxes going forward. Ms. Fumiha urged the government to postpone the GST hike for as long as possible. She suggested that the funds that we've set aside for this term for various future expenditures like the MGP and the use of borrowing for future infrastructure expenditures could provide sufficient fiscal space to postpone the GST increase. I appreciate Ms. Fu's suggestion to delay this, and let me assure her and members of this House that the decision to raise GST was not made lightly. As a government, it is our responsibility to anticipate and plan ahead for future needs. While doing so, we also need to distinguish between one-off factors and underlying structural increases. The GST increase is needed to support structural increases in healthcare spending, among other important needs like preschool education and security. Such healthcare spending is of a completely different scale and nature from the cohort-based package set aside for the Merdeka generation or the Pioneer generation. As mentioned earlier, the government has systematically laid the foundation of a broad-based healthcare system that supports not only seniors, but all Singaporeans, regardless of their age and income. We now provide significant subsidies in all care settings, up to 80% in our public hospitals, and for long-term care services, up to 70% for specialist outpatient services, and up to 75% for polyclinics. MOH expects to spend $6.1 billion in 2019 alone. $6.1 billion in 2019 alone to subsidize patient bills through existing permanent schemes that all Singaporeans enjoy. This does not even include spending to enhance our healthcare facilities and to research more effective treatments. Now, as our population ages, spending on permanent healthcare schemes and other parts of the healthcare system will continue to increase structurally. Funding this requires a structural increase in our operating revenues. In other words, the base of our healthcare spending is rising, and over and above this rising base, we have special packages set aside for our pioneers and Merdeka generations. Every aging society faces similar structural spending pressures. A recent OECD paper highlighted in the median OECD country, public healthcare expenditure is projected to increase by almost 5 percentage points of GDP between 2018 and 2060. 5 percentage points. The OECD's recommended approach is no different from ours. To address the growing fiscal burden from higher healthcare spending and demographic change, without further ballooning of public debt, there is a need for this government to raise primary revenues. The median OECD government is estimated to require additional revenues of 6.5 percentage points of GDP by 2060. 6.5 percentage point. Now, what does 6.5 percentage points of GDP mean? To put it in perspective, we expect to raise about 0.7 percentage points of GDP with the planned 2 percentage point GST increase. So you compare 6.5 percentage point to the 0.7 percentage points of GDP that we have, and you see the scale of the issues in many places. And we have yet to decide on the exact timing of the GST increase. We will exercise care when doing so. We will continue to monitor the prevailing economic conditions, trends in expenditure, and buoyancy of our revenues. And as I said in the budget speech, we have also been preparing a transitional package when this comes in. Now, next, related to the issue that Ms. Fumiha and other members raised, I should also put into perspective the surpluses accumulated so far in this term of government. Now, forecasting is an inherently difficult exercise. Some revenue items are volatile, especially those dependent on sentiment-driven markets such as stamp duty or vehicle quota premiums. For instance, in FY 2018, we had estimated that stamp duty collections would be lower because of property market cooling measures. But the property market defied our expectations. There can also be surprises on the expenditure side. The 2-year suspension of the KL Singapore High-Speed Rail project is a case in point. The unexpected surpluses over the last few years are not due to the introduction of Temasek into the NIRC framework as suggested by Mr. Pritam Singh. The volatilities and uncertainties in revenues and expenditure, as I had just explained, account for most of this surplus. While the government's approach is to look ahead, plan ahead, and prepare for the unexpected, it seems that Mr. Singh would prefer to look backwards to find unexpected revenue surprises and count on them to keep happening. I'm afraid such an approach of hoping for the best is not how we secure Singapore's future. But there is room for improvement. The accuracy of our revenue and expenditure projections, while there's room for improvement, the accuracy of our revenue and expenditure projections has been reasonable and respectable by international standards. Actual revenue and expenditure figures have generally been within plus minus 4% of our original estimates. The Ministry of Finance is constantly looking for ways to improve our forecasts. But the experience of other countries also shows that this is not easy to do. Japan's revenue estimates, for example, had a margin of error of about 11% over the past 5 years. Hong Kong, a small open economy like us, averaged slightly better at 8%. Nonetheless, we will see how we can continue to improve. Mr. Liang Eng Hua also asked how the government intends to use the accumulated surplus. First, let me clarify that any surpluses we have do not simply disappear at the end of the term. They become part of our reserves, which are invested to generate net investment returns contribution. As Mr. Murali Pillai explained, when our economy grows, we have an obligation to contribute to the reserves to be used for the uncertainties of the future. We should also bear in mind that the business cycle can turn, and having some surpluses on hand can allow us to provide targeted support to segments that need help to tide over the downturn. And for a major crisis, we can turn to past reserves. Now, during the global financial crisis in 2008, our accumulated savings allowed us to fund $16.5 billion, or 3/4 of the $20.5 billion resilience package, with the remainder being funded from past reserves. So 16.5 out of 20.5 from current reserves. In 2017, to support the construction industry to tide over a period of cyclical weakness, the government brought forward about $1.4 billion of public sector infrastructure projects to start in FY 2017 and 2018. In planning for FY 2019, we are also faced with the global economic outlook being downgraded by the IMF as global trade tensions grow. More fundamentally, we should not have the mentality of trying to spend everything that we have before the end of each term of government. As part of our long-term approach, we continue to review our plans for the long term and will deploy financial resources where necessary. So on this note, let me briefly reiterate the role of our reserves. Today, the net investment returns contributions, or NIRC, is already the single largest contributor of our revenues, larger than any category of taxes we collect. If we did not have the NIRC framework, we would have had to double our personal income tax collection or our GST collection to raise the same amount of revenue. In fact, we will not even be able to raise the same amount of revenue because it's now the largest category, and doubling all the rest does not give you that same amount. Our reserves are our strategic assets. We are a small country exposed to global forces beyond our control. Our reserves will allow us to tide over a crisis without being reliant on others. We should not underestimate the need for a rainy day fund. Singapore faces particular vulnerabilities given our lack of natural resources. With an economy worth nearly $500 billion a year, we should set aside enough to protect it and our people's livelihoods and future. So let us stay disciplined. Today, we take up to 50% of the expected returns for spending and plow back at least 50% to grow the principal and generate more returns. In this way, both the current and future generations benefit from the reserves, and we can be confident of our future. Now, Mr. Pritam Singh referred to a Business Times article and asked for more data on our reserves so that, I quote, that Singaporeans can crunch the numbers themselves and better understand budget policy trade-offs, unquote. He has also filed a cut on transparency on GIC's performance, which will be answered at the Ministry of Finance Committee of Supply. But let me explain why he is misinformed. Our reserves comprise assets invested by MAS, GIC, and Temasek Holdings. The size of MAS and Temasek Holdings assets is public information. Only the GIC portion is not disclosed, and that is because with the GIC figure, you get the complete picture of our reserves. I was running the Monetary Authority of Singapore during the global financial crisis with ESM Goh Chok Tong as our chairman. And let me tell you that in a crisis where the most powerful central banks in the world and even some of the biggest financial institutions were taken completely by surprise by the speed and scale of the turn in the markets and the global economy. Many things could have gone wrong. We not only rode through the crisis well, but emerged stronger. And having our reserves as a strategic asset played a key role in this. So let us not squander this strategic advantage that we have. Our reserves serve as a strategic defense to deter parties who wish to undermine the interests of Singapore and Singaporeans. Such moves go beyond currency speculation attacks to other types of threats. As Mr. Muhammad Irshad noted, we live in a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Our reserves, like our investments in defense and security, give us the confidence to plan long-term, knowing that we will have the ability to take care of our people and to defend our sovereignty. Lastly, let me talk about borrowing. Over the past decade, we are making significant investments in our infrastructure to enhance connectivity and create new growth opportunities for tomorrow. As I mentioned in the budget statement, the government is studying the options of borrowing carefully as a tool to finance major long-term infrastructure, and will announce our plans in due course. In my roundup speech last year, I mentioned a number of infrastructure projects which our statutory boards and government-owned companies are looking to borrow to finance. This included the Integrated Waste Management Facility by the National Environment Agency and the JB Singapore Rapid Transit System Link by the Land Transport Authority. In this year's budget speech, I mentioned our long-term infrastructure needs. And as Ms. Ting Pei Ling has noted, we also have planned ahead for our aging infrastructure. And all this are long-term needs that have to be studied carefully, and when ready, we'll share more. Now, as these projects have lumpy upfront costs and benefits that span many generations, borrowing can be a fair and efficient tool to finance and spread out this cost instead of raising taxes sharply to fund them. In this regard, there is a simple answer to Mr. Pritam Singh's question about how borrowing will impact revenues available for future recurrent spending. Mr. Pritam asked how borrowing will impact revenues available for future recurrent spending. It does not. Borrowing does not create new revenues for recurrent spending. It merely converts a concentrated lump of spending in a few years into a smoother stream of loan repayments with interest. And we must have every intention to pay back what we borrow. So in fact, it is irresponsible for a government to borrow to spend on recurrent needs, such as healthcare and security. Such borrowing shifts the burden of paying for today's needs onto future generations. And this goes against the same principles of intergenerational equity that Mr. Pritam Singh said he stands for. And Mr. Sito Ipin has rightfully cautioned against this and has called for further safeguards to prevent excessive borrowing. Now, I share Mr. Sito Ipin's views. If we proceed to use government debt, we'll make sure that this is done in a disciplined and prudent manner. Safeguards are in place to ensure that the debt, its interest, and repayment are sustainable and in line with the Reserve's protection framework. Borrowing or not, it does not change the fact that all government projects should be cost-efficient, well-managed, and must yield economic or social benefits. Now, what do we have to show in 10, 20 years' time? An important question raised by Ms. Ting Pei Ling. Now, borrowing is not just a financing tool. If used sustainably, it allows us to build a better living environment for our people and to make Singapore a dynamic and livable city. This is not just a question about growth, but also one of sustainability, as emphasized by Dr. Teo Ho Pin. Mr. Pritam Singh asked if building Singapore will come at the expense of our green spaces. He should not take the word building so literally, not just in bricks and mortars. We have always incorporated greenery in our urban plans, and it is not only part of our climate change resilience effort, it is part of Singapore's identity, a city in a garden. And the Ministry of National Development will share more details on their greening efforts as part of their Committee of Supply. As we calibrate our fiscal tools, the ultimate goal is threefold: to remain pro-growth, ensure that our overall system of taxes and transfers remain fair and equitable, and keep the tax burdens on the middle income low. There have been calls for the government to do more in redistribution through the tax system to address income and wealth inequality. Mr. Saktiandi Supaat suggested if we could tier GST for different goods to lower the tax burdens on the lower income. And this has been raised multiple times in budget debates over the years. But let me briefly reiterate the key arguments why a multi-rate GST is a less efficient way to help the lower income. First, it is difficult to define a necessity. Take bread, for example. There are the white and wholemeal loaves that you can find at supermarkets. But there are also loaves sold at artisan bakeries. On top of that, there are so many types of breads: floss buns, baguettes, kaya toast at a coffee shop. So where do we draw the line? Second, better off households tend to spend more in absolute terms and thus benefit more from these reduced GST rates. And finally, the experience of many countries and relevant studies also show that a multi-rate GST system raises businesses' compliance and administrative costs significantly, which are then passed on to consumers. Our approach is to have a flat GST rate while providing structural offsets through the GST voucher scheme. And this is a permanent scheme to provide more help to lower-income households and seniors. It is also more targeted, as those who need help most get it most directly. And this is in addition to other schemes and programs to help the less well-off. Mr. Yee Chia Sing spoke about whether car ownership can be taken into account when means testing, while Ms. Jessica Tan and Mr. Lim Biao Chuan asked if annual value criteria can be removed. No criterion is perfect, but if we put all our different schemes together, we have a system that is progressive and, as Mr. Yee Chia Sing said, fair. Now, if we use vehicle ownership, for example, should we distinguish among the make and model and what the vehicle is used for? The government will continue to regularly review the eligibility criteria to ensure that our schemes benefit the intended groups while being practical to implement. For those who have specific needs, the best approach is to appeal to the relevant authorities, which will consider each appeal based on its own merits. Ms. Shara Chan has argued for a number of other measures to address growing wealth inequality, such as the introduction of a net wealth tax or an inheritance tax. Now, I spoke briefly about this during the budget debates last year. There are many ways many types of wealth taxes. What works best depends on a country's overall tax system and broader economic and social circumstances. Our approach has been to tax fixed assets, which, as the name suggests, are fixed and less mobile. Indeed, a large portion of Singapore's household wealth is held in the form of housing assets. We have two types of taxes on property, stamp duty and property tax. We've been making them more progressive over the years. Owner-occupied properties enjoy a concessionary property tax rate, with the rate being higher for higher-end homes. The property tax rates are also higher for non-owner-occupied residential properties, such as those left vacant or rented out. In last year's budget, I introduced a new tier for the buyer's stamp duty for the value of properties in excess of $1 million. We'll continue to monitor developments in this space. At this point, let me address the concerns arising from the increase in diesel tax. Mr. Dennis Tan acknowledged that the increase in diesel tax makes our environment more resilient, but asked if this is worth the price of potentially higher business costs. We must go beyond framing this as a simple trade-off to a broader understanding of the longer-term approach we are taking to address the increasingly urgent issues of vehicular emissions. Diesel exhaust contains substantial amounts of particulate matters and nitrogen oxides, which are associated with an increased risk of lung cancer and respiratory infection. Let me reread that. Diesel exhaust contains a substantial amounts of particulate matter and nitrogen oxides, which are associated with an increased risk of lung cancer and respiratory infections. The long-term impact of excessive diesel use on the health of our family and children is significant. It is thus necessary to use a price signal to nudge diesel users towards cleaner and more sustainable alternatives. Diesel tax is only one part of a larger roadmap to discourage diesel consumption. In 2013, we introduced the Early Turnover Scheme, which has helped more than 40,000 commercial goods vehicles switch to cleaner and more fuel-efficient diesel vehicles. In 2018, we introduced the Vehicular Emissions Scheme to further incentivize the purchase of cleaner vehicles and discourage the purchase of polluting vehicles. It is encouraging to note that there were no new diesel taxis registered in 2018. No new diesel taxis in 2018. The number of diesel taxis has also decreased by more than 30%, from 23,700 in 2016 to 15,100 in 2018, as taxi companies switch to electric and electric hybrid taxis. Mr. Gan Thiam Poh suggested exempting vehicles and machinery from diesel tax, if there are currently no non-diesel alternatives. But this works against what we are trying to do. The increase in diesel tax will help nudge businesses which are heavy diesel users towards greater efficiency. For example, companies can consider adopting consolidated logistics and use better routing applications to optimize their deliveries. In the interim, we have provided a transitionary offset package to cushion the cost impact till 2022 as businesses adapt to reduce their diesel consumption. Mr. Ang Hin Kee, Engineer Dr. Lee Bee Hua spoke about the impact of diesel duty on taxi drivers. We recognize the cost impact faced by taxi drivers. As Senior Parliamentary Secretary B.M. King said, all taxi companies have pledged to step forward to pass the entire savings from the special tax reductions to their drivers. There are also incentives being offered to encourage taxi drivers to switch to petrol hybrid taxis as we strive for lower emissions. This year, I had several good conversations with people about this budget at various forums. Some asked me, what about me? there didn't seem to be anything in this budget for me. Now, even if there's nothing new for you this year, you and the family have certainly benefited from every one of our budgets. As I said, we must not look at the budget in isolation. One budget builds on another. So let me outline how this budget benefits different groups. Our young people have benefited from stronger support in education, housing, and parenthood. They also benefit from the opportunities that the vibrant economy brings, as I explained earlier. We provide up to $80,000 in grants for new BTO flats and $120,000 for resale flats, and invest even more later when the estates undergo upgrading. Parents can receive a maximum of between $18,000 to $32,000 in marriage and parenthood benefits for each eligible child, on top of paid maternity and paternity leave, tax reliefs, and preschool subsidies. Our middle-income families, especially those feeling sandwiched, supporting retiree parents and school-going children, will benefit from many schemes. For example, their children receive significant education subsidies. Without these subsidies, families would have to pay more than 60 times the current fees for their children in school. Without these subsidies, families would have to pay more than 60 times the current fees for their children in school. University fees would also be 4 times what Singaporean students currently pay. And this is for a world-class education. The Pioneer and Merdeka generation packages ease healthcare costs for their parents, and in so doing, help with their families' overall expenses. And this year, many will receive a number of top-ups, such as their children's EduSave or post-secondary education accounts, and their parents' CPF. And all who pay income tax will receive a rebate. Some middle-income and upper-income families also commented that the tax rebate of $200 is insignificant and of not much benefit to them. But we must not forget that overall, income taxes are kept low so that they can keep a large part of what they earn. This year, as Mr. Ong Teng Koon mentioned, one of the key things that help with keeping expenses manageable. I should share a story of a recent encounter with a Singaporean who came back from a very developed country. And he told me, he said, Mr. Heng, I'm very happy to be back in Singapore because first I'm very happy to be back with my parents and family. But I'm also very happy that I got a 32% pay rise. I say, wow, your new employer has been most generous. He said, no, my employer who sends me back from the headquarters kept my salary, the same salary. But when I added up all the taxes that I paid in that country, at the city level, at the state level, at the federal level, it added up to 32% of my pay. So I thought that was a very powerful story. And you can look up the tax rates of many of the countries that have extremely generous welfare system. But as some of you shared, the moment you take your paycheck, more than half is gone. And so let us not forget this point. As Ms. Sarah Chan put it, we must not see the budget as simply a bag of benefits that serve some people in one year or the other. It is our strategic financial plan for the future. And because we take a long-term approach, we cannot see each year's budget in isolation. Our budget builds on the foundation of earlier budgets. We have a multi-year plan which tackles our priorities as systematically as we can. We plan ahead by setting out the strategy for mitigating and adapting the impacts of climate change. We look at the needs of different groups of people as needs evolve and grow. And we invest in growing our economy and in our people so that we have resources to do more for our people and their children and our children later. So I'm glad that many MPs have asked the questions that many MPs have asked the question, what is in it for us, Singapore, for Singapore? What is in it for us, for Singapore? Rather than what is in it for me. Budget 2019 and our previous budgets are to build a better Singapore for all of us. All of us benefit from a Singapore which is strong and united, with a strong defense to protect our way of life, a clean and green environment, a livable city and enduring home, a vibrant economy where opportunities abound, and a strong community where no one is left behind. My colleagues will share more on what the government will be doing along these lines during the Committee of Supply. As Professor Yaacob Ibrahim, Mr. Darrell David, and Ms. Cheng Li Hui have mentioned, our bicentennial is an opportune time for us to reflect on how we have come so far, on what we have built together, and what more we can do as individuals and in our organizations to strengthen our society. I look forward to our VWOs, clan associations, and religious groups continuing to step forward, regardless of race, language, or religion, to uplift the disadvantaged amongst us. I look forward to more people, academics, professionals, and indeed all citizens, providing constructive suggestions on how best to tackle critical issues confronting Singapore, and as Mr. Chris D'Souza mentioned, on strengthening our social compact. The bicentennial is also a good time to reflect on what being an independent, sovereign nation-state means. It means fiercely protecting the precious freedoms that we have to chart our own destiny, even as our relationships with our neighbors and the world change. It means appreciating that we have our own unique way of solving our problems, the Singapore way, and indeed not to be pressured to conform to theories which sound fashionable but do not work for us. It means committing to give our best, building on what past generations have done. Together, we can advance and make this little red dot shine even more brightly. So let us work together to build a strong and united Singapore.